For decades, the modern school system has claimed to be the gateway to success. We're taught to memorize facts, complete assignments, and prepare for standardized tests, all in the name of learning. Yet after years of schooling, many of us realize something troubling. We forget most of what we learned shortly after the exam. And if this isn't a failure on our part, the system itself is flawed. The problem is that the traditional school system focuses on teaching students how to regurgitate information, not how to truly understand it. The emphasis is placed on memorization and testing, rather than critical thinking and problem solving. We are trained to pass exams and follow instructions, but not to question or innovate. This method doesn't encourage deep comprehension, and it promotes surface-level learning. The result? The brain's true potential remains untapped. Feynman's critique of this system was clear. Education should not be about filling students with knowledge, but about teaching them how to think, explore, and understand. If we continue down this path, we miss the opportunity to nurture a generation of innovators and critical thinkers. Richard Feynman, one of the most brilliant minds of the 20th century, had a radical perspective on learning. He didn't buy into the traditional school system where memorization and rote learning were prized. Feynman believed that real education goes beyond the ability to repeat facts and formulas. Instead, he argued, it's about understanding the fundamental principles behind the information. He saw the school system as stifling creativity and limiting students' ability to think critically. Feynman's critique was straightforward. Most education systems fail to teach students how to actually learn. Instead, they teach them to memorize and regurgitate. When Feynman looked at the way his peers learned, he noticed that they could memorize complex formulas and equations, but couldn't explain what those formulas really meant or why they worked. To Feynman, this was a clear sign that they didn't truly understand the material. Instead of simply passing on information, Feynman advocated for a system that nurtures deep comprehension. He emphasized the importance of breaking down complex concepts into their simplest forms. He believed that teaching students to explain things simply, as if they were explaining it to a child, was the key to mastering any subject. This active engagement with material, where students don't just memorize but truly understand the principles behind the facts, is Feynman's approach to real learning. Rote learning, the process of memorizing information without understanding its underlying meaning, has a detrimental effect on the brain's potential. When students are forced to memorize facts, dates, formulas, and terms without understanding the why behind them, they aren't truly engaging their mind. Instead, they are filling their brains with information that may stick temporarily, but is often forgotten shortly after the test is over. Feynman believed this form of learning actually stunts cognitive growth. By focusing on memorization, students miss out on the deeper connections that help solidify knowledge. When we memorize a formula, for example, we may remember how to use it on a test, but we won't understand how it fits into the larger framework of the subject. This is where real understanding falters. The brain needs to actively engage with information, not just store it. The consequences are far-reaching. When students are taught to memorize instead of understand, they fail to develop essential cognitive skills like critical thinking, problem solving, and creativity. These skills, which are key to real-world success, are left underdeveloped. In the long run, rote learning leaves the brain unable to apply knowledge in new, unfamiliar contexts because it has been trained to work in a rigid, formulaic way. Feynman's critique wasn't just about what was wrong with the school system, it was about what was missing. An educational approach that nurtures deep understanding and critical thinking, which can only happen when we move beyond memorization and actively engage with ideas. The current school system is built on rigid structures, standardized tests, and a focus on compliance, which often suppresses a student's natural curiosity and creativity. Instead of fostering an environment where students feel free to explore and ask questions, schools encourage conformity. The system teaches students to follow the prescribed curriculums, memorize the right answers, and avoid mistakes, leaving little room for innovative thinking. Feynman was a strong advocate for allowing students to explore their own curiosity. He believed that true learning happens when students are free to ask questions without fear of looking foolish. Unfortunately, the structure of the modern education system often discourages this. In schools, students are expected to focus on completing assignments and passing exams, not on understanding the material or applying it in creative ways. This approach not only limits critical thinking, but also squashes innovative problem solving. Feynman understood that creativity thrives when we are encouraged to question and think for ourselves. He often said that one of the greatest aspects of learning is the ability to think outside the box, to look at a problem from a new angle, and to visualize concepts in unconventional ways. Unfortunately, this kind of learning is rare in a system where students are punished for deviating from the correct answer. Instead of fostering curiosity, the driving force of all great intellectual achievements, the school system often trains students to view learning as a series of rules to follow. For a student to think like a genius, they must be given the freedom to explore and question the material. Without the space for curiosity and creativity, they're restricted to a narrow path that limits their potential. The true genius of Feynman's learning method is in its ability to encourage open-ended exploration, a stark contrast to the structured, rigid environment of most classrooms today. Richard Feynman didn't just point out the flaws of the school system. He offered a radical solution that has the potential to completely change how we approach education and intellectual growth. Instead of memorizing facts and following rigid systems, Feynman's method emphasizes active engagement with the material and understanding the underlying principles. The solution lies in adopting a new learning framework that encourages questioning, simplifying, and visualizing complex concepts. Feynman's approach to learning is about asking why repeatedly until you get to the root cause of a concept. It's about simplifying ideas so that you can teach them in your own words. This method doesn't just encourage memorization, it forces you to understand deeply enough to explain it to someone else as if they were a child. One of Feynman's most profound beliefs was that learning isn't about absorbing facts, it's about understanding the logic behind them and then applying that understanding to solve real-world problems. This approach can be applied in any field, from physics and engineering to art and business, because the fundamental principles of learning through simplicity and understanding are universal. Feynman's method also promotes creativity by giving students the freedom to explore and think critically. And instead of following preset formulas or answers, students should be encouraged to question everything and seek out their own answers and approach learning as a joyful discovery process. This kind of intellectual freedom helps unlock the full potential of the brain, allowing anyone to think like a genius. By adopting Feynman's radical approach, we can reshape the way we learn, making it a process of active discovery and deep understanding rather than rote memorization. This shift will not only lead to better education, but will also create innovative thinkers and problem solvers who can apply their knowledge in creative, real-world ways. Feynman's method provides a path to intellectual freedom, where the joy of learning and the thrill of discovery are at the heart of the process.